Elixir comes with a set of libraries known as OTP. One of those libraries is the GenServer module, which provides a common interface to help handle concurrency. In this episode, we'll get started with the basics of GenServer by using it to help us manage a shopping list. Let's get started. Here we have an empty module called ShoppingList. First, we'll add the use macro to bring in the GenServer module. Now let's create a function named startLink, which we'll use to start our shopping list process. And inside it, we'll call the GenServer function of the same name, startLink. We'll use module to return our shopping list module, and then we'll pass in any initial state we want to start with. We'll use an empty list. Once we call GenServer startLink, the init callback is triggered. Let's define it. It takes one parameter, which is the initial state of an empty list, included as the second argument in GenServer startLink. We'll call it list since it represents our shopping list. Init, along with most other GenServer functions, has a specific format it needs to return. We'll keep ours simple and return a two-element tuple with OK and our list to get our shopping list started. For a full list of return values the different GenServer functions expect, refer to the GenServer docs. With that, we can fire up an IEX session and see what starting our GenServer looks like. The GenServer startLink function, and by extension our shopping list startLink function, will return a tuple with OK and our process identifier or PID. We'll pattern match to grab the PID. Let's check to make sure everything started correctly and that our process is still alive. Great, our shopping list is up and running. Now let's add a way to add and remove items to it. Let's go back to our module. And one important concept regarding GenServers is that they're organized into two parts, the client and the server, each running in their own process. Now you can split the client and server into separate modules, but for the purposes of our demo, we'll stay simple and keep everything in the same module. But we will organize our functions by whether they're part of the client or part of the server. Let's start with our startLink function, which is part of our client API. And our init callback is part of our server callbacks. Great, now let's create a function for our client API named add, which will add items to our shopping list. It will take a PID and then the item we want to add to it. GenServer gives us two options on how we want to update our shopping list. Synchronously, where we care about a response, and asynchronously, where we don't care about a response. Since we're just adding items to our shopping list, we don't necessarily care about a response, so we'll use GenServer cast to send an asynchronous request to the server. GenServer cast will take the PID we passed in and the item we want to add to our shopping list. And when GenServer cast is called, the handlecast server callback is invoked. Let's add that now. It will accept two parameters, our item and our current shopping list. Then we can update our shopping list. Handlecast expects a two-element tuple as its return, with no reply as the first element and the updated shopping list as the second element. Now that we can add items to our shopping list, let's add a way to view it. We'll add another function to our client API named view, which will take a PID. Since we care about a response here, we'll use the synchronous GenServer call function, and we'll pass in the PID we received in the atom view. This will invoke the handle call server callback, so let's implement that too. The view atom we use will be passed in as the first argument for our handle call function, so let's pattern match on it. The second argument passed in is a two-element tuple that includes the caller's PID. We don't need it for this demo, so let's ignore it. And finally, the third argument is our existing state, in this case our current shopping list. Since we just want to return our shopping list, according to the docs, we'll need to return a three-element tuple with reply as the first element. The second element is what we want to return, in this case our shopping list. And finally, we want to return our shopping list as the state we want to continue with as the last element in the tuple. With that, let's test it out. Going back to our terminal, we'll reload our module. Now we need to add a few items to our shopping list. Let's add eggs, milk, and cheese. Then let's see if we can view our shopping list. And great, it worked. Now let's go back to our module and add a way for us to remove items from our shopping list. Let's name our new function remove, which will take our shopping list PID and the item we want to remove from the list. We'll then call GenServer cast since we don't care about a response. Again, we'll pass in the PID, and for our second argument, we'll use a 2-element tuple. The first element will be an atom remove, which we can pattern match with in our callback. Then we'll use the item we want to remove as the second element. Now we can define our corresponding handle cast callback. In the first parameter, we'll pattern match against the first element, the atom remove, that we used in our 2-element tuple above. Then our existing shopping list will be the second parameter. One note, this handle cast function will never match unless it comes first. Now we need to remove the item from our shopping list. We'll use enum reject and pass in our existing shopping list. Then we'll write a function to return true if any item from the list matches what was passed in. And then we can return another 2-element tuple with no reply in our updated list. Let's go back to the terminal and reload our module. Then let's double check the items in our shopping list. Then let's try removing an item from the list. And great, it was removed from our shopping list. Now we just need a way to stop our shopping list process. Let's go back to our module. We'll add a function named stop to the client API that takes the PID we want to stop. Then we'll call GenServer stop with the PID that was passed in, the shutdown reason of normal, and a timeout of infinity. Since normal and infinity are default values, we don't need to include them here, but I'll leave them in for clarity. Now let's implement the corresponding callback terminate. It will take a reason, which we specified as normal, and since we don't care about it for this demo, let's ignore it. And then our current shopping list. Let's also print out a message to help us see our shopping list shutting down. And then we need to return a single atom OK. Going back to our terminal one last time, let's reload our shopping list module. Then let's double check the items in our shopping list. Now let's try stopping our shopping list process. And if we check, we can see that our process was stopped. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for watching and happy coding.